In a bustling town in modern-day Nigeria, Amina was born to a woman named Zainab, who had seen the highs and lows of life. Zainab had married for love, a decision that had brought her immense joy at first, but also unspeakable sorrow when her husband, Amina's father, died suddenly, leaving her to fend for herself and her daughter. Life was not easy for Zainab, and she struggled to make ends meet, often working long hours and sacrificing her own needs to provide for Amina. Despite her hardships, Zainab held on to a belief that love was important, but as time passed and the weight of her struggles grew, she began to impart a different lesson to her daughter: "Love won't feed you, my child," she would say with a tired yet determined look in her eyes. "Make sure you marry a man with wealth." As Amina grew, she became acutely aware of the sacrifices her mother made to provide for them. They lived in a modest home, and while they never went hungry, there was always a sense of just barely getting by. Zainab worked tirelessly, often taking on additional work to ensure Amina could attend school and have a chance at a better life. She never missed an opportunity to remind Amina that their struggles were a result of her marrying for love rather than security. On their walks through town, Zainab would point out the luxurious cars and grand houses of the wealthy, her voice filled with a mix of longing and bitterness. "This is what you deserve, my daughter," she would say, her eyes lingering on the elegant homes. "Don't settle for less." As the years passed, Amina blossomed into a beautiful young woman. Her mother's words echoed in her mind, shaping her aspirations and desires. She became determined to marry a wealthy man who could give her the life her mother never had. Amina's beauty and charm attracted many suitors, but she was selective, rejecting those who weren't financially stable despite their genuine affection for her. Her friends often questioned her choices, unable to understand why she would turn down men who clearly adored her. But Amina was resolute, believing with all her heart that wealth would bring her the happiness and security she craved. Each rejection strengthened her resolve, and she became more focused on finding a man who could provide the luxurious life she had always dreamed of. One day, as Amina was walking through the market, she caught the attention of a well-dressed man named Idris. He was charming, confident, and most importantly, he drove an expensive car that made heads turn wherever he went. Idris seemed to be the answer to her prayers. He spoke with ease about his successful business ventures and his luxurious lifestyle, painting a picture of a life filled with opulence and ease. Amina was captivated by his charm and apparent wealth, and she quickly found herself drawn to him. Idris, in turn, was taken by Amina's beauty and grace. Their courtship was swift, filled with grand gestures and promises of a future brimming with luxury. Amina believed she had finally found the man who would give her the life she desired. Idris proposed to Amina in a grand gesture that left her breathless. The proposal was everything she had ever dreamed of, complete with an expensive ring and a romantic setting that seemed straight out of a fairy tale. Amina eagerly accepted, and the preparations for their wedding began. The wedding was a lavish affair, the talk of the town, with everyone praising Amina's good fortune. The celebration was filled with laughter, music, and an air of envy from those who wished they were in Amina's place. Zainab was proud of her daughter, believing she had secured her future. Amina, too, was overjoyed, convinced that she had achieved everything she had ever wanted. As she stood next to Idris, surrounded by the trappings of wealth, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was the life she had worked so hard to attain, and she was determined to enjoy every moment of it. Soon after the wedding, Amina moved into Idris's home. She was filled with anticipation, eager to begin her new life surrounded by luxury. However, to her surprise, the reality was far from what she had imagined. The grand mansion she had envisioned was nowhere to be found. Instead, she found herself in a modest house that was comfortable but far from luxurious. Idris, seeing the disappointment in her eyes, confessed that he was not as wealthy as he had claimed. He had borrowed money to maintain the appearance of wealth, hoping to win her over. Amina was devastated, feeling betrayed and disillusioned. The life of luxury she had dreamed of was nothing more than a facade. She realized that she had married a man who was poorer than she thought, and the future she had envisioned was slipping through her fingers. Amina's marriage quickly began to deteriorate as the reality of their financial situation set in. The debts Idris had incurred to impress her weighed heavily on them, and their relationship became strained. The charming man who had once swept her off her feet was now burdened with worries, and Amina found herself trapped in a life she had not bargained for. The once rosy future she had imagined was now a daily struggle to make ends meet. She regretted her decision but found herself too proud to return to her mother, fearing the "I told you so" that would surely come. The dream of luxury had turned into a harsh reality of poverty, and Amina felt more alone than ever. Unable to cope with her new life, Amina eventually returned to her mother, defeated and ashamed. Zainab welcomed her back with open arms, but her disappointment was evident. "You chose wrong," she said, her voice filled with a mix of sadness and frustration. "But it's not too late to find a better life." Amina, still reeling from her failed marriage, vowed not to make the same mistake again. She realized that her pursuit of wealth had led her down a path of heartache and regret, but she was determined to learn from her mistakes and find a way to secure the future she so desperately wanted. After some time, Amina met another wealthy man named Alhaji Usman. He was much older than Idris, but his wealth was undeniable, and his reputation as a successful businessman was well known throughout the town. Amina saw this as her second chance to secure the luxurious life she had always wanted. She quickly accepted his proposal, believing that this time she had made the right choice. The wedding was not as grand as her first, but it was still an elegant affair, and Amina felt a sense of accomplishment. She had learned from her past, and was determined not to repeat the same mistakes. This marriage, she believed, would finally bring her the happiness and security she had been seeking. Amina finally experienced the wealth she had always dreamed of. Alhaji Usman showered her with expensive gifts, designer clothes, exquisite jewelry, and luxurious vacations. Their home, a grand mansion filled with opulent furniture and priceless art, was the epitome of extravagance. Amina became the talk of the town, admired and envied by many. Her mother, Zainab, beamed with pride, confident that her daughter's life was perfect. However, despite the abundance of wealth surrounding her, Amina found herself feeling strangely empty. The joy she expected to find in material riches eluded her, replaced by a growing sense of unease that she couldn't quite understand. As time passed, Amina and Alhaji Usman grew distant. The once frequent romantic dinners and intimate conversations dwindled as Alhaji Usman became increasingly consumed by his business affairs. He spent long hours away, leaving Amina alone in the vast, empty mansion. In her solitude, Amina tried to fill the void with more material possessions, buying things she didn't need in hopes of feeling fulfilled. Yet, the emptiness inside her only grew. She longed for companionship, for the warmth of love she had once imagined wealth would bring, but it remained out of reach, buried beneath the glittering facade of her luxurious life. Amina's insatiable desire for more began to strain her marriage. She was never satisfied, always wanting the latest, the most exclusive, the most expensive. Alhaji Usman, initially indulgent, began to tire of her constant demands. He had married Amina not just for her beauty, but for the companionship he had hoped they would share. Yet, as time wore on, he realized that his wife cared more for the wealth he provided than for him. Their conversations became strained, filled with tension and unspoken frustrations. Amina's lack of empathy and her obsession with material gain left Alhaji Usman feeling more alone in their marriage than ever before. Their relationship continued to deteriorate. Amina's fixation on wealth drove a wedge between them, and Alhaji Usman began to withdraw, spending even less time at home. Amina, now surrounded by all the luxury she had once desired, found herself increasingly lonely. She had alienated herself from the men she had married, and the friends she had once known seemed distant, as if sensing the coldness that had seeped into her life. The love and happiness she had expected to find in wealth were nowhere to be seen. Instead, she was left with a deep sense of regret, realizing too late that she had traded genuine connection for material gain. Alhaji Usman eventually grew tired of Amina's unrelenting materialism and lack of affection. He began to spend more time away on business, choosing to escape the cold atmosphere of their home rather than confront the reality of their failing marriage. Amina, now fully aware of the void between them, was left to wander the halls of their mansion, surrounded by the trappings of wealth, but devoid of any meaningful relationships. The marriage, which had once seemed filled with promise, had crumbled, leaving Amina to face the consequences of her choices alone. Alone in her grand home, Amina began to reflect on her life choices. She thought of the men who had truly loved her but whom she had rejected because they were not wealthy. Memories of simpler times, when love and happiness seemed more attainable, haunted her. She realized that in her relentless pursuit of wealth, she had sacrificed love, happiness, and genuine companionship. The emptiness she now felt was a result of the very choices she had made. Choices driven by a desire for a life that had ultimately left her unfulfilled. As she sat in her luxurious surroundings, Amina understood that wealth could never replace the deeper connections she had lost along the way. As Amina sat alone in her grand mansion, memories from her past flooded her mind. She thought of the days when she had eagerly followed her mother's advice, convinced that wealth would bring her the fulfillment she craved. Now, with 2 failed marriages and an empty heart, Amina saw the stark reality of her choices. The luxury that once dazzled her now felt like a gilded cage, trapping her in a life devoid of true happiness. She had pursued wealth with all her might, only to discover that it could not fill the void within her. A deep sense of regret washed over her, and she wondered how different her life might have been had she followed her heart instead of chasing after riches. Years passed, and Amina remained alone. Her once celebrated beauty began to fade, and the wealth that had once brought her a fleeting sense of satisfaction no longer held the same allure. The grand mansion that had been the symbol of her success now felt empty and cold, its opulence a constant reminder of what she had lost. Amina watched from a distance as friends and family built lives filled with love, joy, and companionship. They celebrated milestones, shared laughter, and found comfort in each other's presence, while Amina remained isolated, her life marked by loneliness. The luxury that surrounded her only emphasized the emptiness she felt inside, and she realized that wealth, without love, was a hollow achievement. One day, Amina received an unexpected visit from an old friend, Mariam. Mariam had married for love and lived a simple but contented life. As they sat together, Mariam spoke warmly of her husband and the joys of their modest life. She described the happiness they found in each other's company, the love they shared, and the satisfaction of raising a family together. Amina listened in silence, her heart heavy with the realization of how different her life could have been. Mariam's words were like a mirror, reflecting the stark contrast between their lives. While Mariam had chosen love and found fulfillment, Amina had chosen wealth and ended up alone. The visit left Amina with a deep sense of longing for the life she had never known, a life filled with love, connection, and true happiness. Summoning all her courage, Amina decided it was time to face her past. She traveled to her childhood home to visit her mother, Zainab, who was now older and frailer. With a heavy heart, Amina apologized for the choices she had made, for the path she had taken in pursuit of wealth, and for ignoring the desires of her own heart. Tears filled her eyes as she admitted how lost and empty she felt, despite the riches she had acquired. Zainab, her face lined with years of wisdom, embraced her daughter tightly. "I wanted the best for you," she said gently, "but I see now that I should have taught you that wealth without love is empty. True happiness comes from the heart, not from what we possess." Amina wept in her mother's arms, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders as she began to understand the deeper truth her mother had spoken. Determined to change her life, Amina made a bold decision. She sold the grand mansion and moved into a smaller, more modest home. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of freedom, unburdened by the trappings of wealth. Amina began to focus on building genuine relationships with those around her, reaching out to old friends and making new connections. She spent her days helping others, volunteering in her community, and finding fulfillment in giving rather than acquiring. Though her life was no longer marked by luxury, Amina discovered a sense of peace and contentment that had eluded her for so long. She realized that true wealth was not measured by material possessions but by the love, compassion, and joy that came from living a life with purpose. Amina's story soon spread throughout the community, becoming a powerful lesson for others. Her journey served as a reminder that wealth, without love and empathy, leads to a lonely and unfulfilled life. Through her transformation, Amina found redemption and showed others the importance of following one's heart and cherishing the relationships that truly matter. In the end, Amina discovered that the greatest treasures in life are those that cannot be bought, but are earned through love, kindness, and a life well lived.